The industrial floor buffer hummed with a low, vibrating drone that traveled all the way up Chloe Evans's arms, settling into her shoulders as a dull, persistent ache. It was the only sound in the cavernous lobby of Rinaldi Tower, a sprawling expanse of black marble and chrome that felt more like a mausoleum than a place of business at 2 a.m. Chloe tightened her grip on the handle, her knuckles white against the gray rubber. She wasn't just tired. Tired was a luxury she had lost months ago. This was a biological failure. A cold, sticky sweat had plastered her sage-green uniform to her lower back, despite the building's aggressive air conditioning. Her vision was beginning to fray at the edges, little spots of static dancing in the corners of her eyes like interference on an old television screen. She knew exactly what was happening. She had felt this specific, terrifying hollowness enough times since she was 12 to recognize the slide. Her blood sugar was dropping. Fast. Just 20 more minutes, she told herself. The thought sluggish and heavy, like wading through molasses. Finish the south quadrant. Get the check. Buy juice. She stopped the machine for a second, leaning heavily against the handle, breathing through her mouth. The air smelled of lemon polish and ozone. She reached into the pocket of her apron, her fingers trembling uncontrollably, searching for something she knew wasn't there. The roll of glucose tablets was empty. The granola bar she usually kept for emergencies had been split in half 3 hours ago. Half for her, half for the 6-year-old girl currently hiding behind the reception desk. Chloe glanced toward the massive, curved desk of polished obsidian that dominated the center of the room. From this angle, no one could see the small nest she had made with a spare coat and a backpack. "Lily?" she whispered, though the distance was too great for the child to hear. The anxiety of having her daughter in the building was an acid burn in her chest, competing with the dizziness. It was strictly against protocol. If the supervisor, Mr. Henderson, found out, Chloe wouldn't just be fired. She would be blacklisted from the agency. But the babysitter had demanded payment up front this week, and the envelope of cash Chloe had hidden in the sugar jar at their tiny apartment was gone, used to pay the back rent before the eviction notice turned into a sheriff at the door. She had no choice. She never had choices anymore. Chloe pushed the buffer forward again, but her legs felt like they were made of lead. The hunger wasn't a rumble in her stomach. It was a cellular scream. Her brain was misfiring, thoughts disjointed. She thought of Brandon. The anger flared hot and sudden, burning through the fog, but it was quickly extinguished by exhaustion. Her brother was gone. He had taken the easy way out, leaving her with the wreckage, the debts, and the terrifying shadows that now stretched over her life. Focus. Clean the floor. Don't pass out. The revolving doors at the main entrance began to turn. The sound was a rhythmic whoosh-thud that echoed sharply in the silence. Chloe froze. The security guard at the front desk, a kindly older man named Jerry, who usually turned a blind eye to Lily's presence, straightened up so fast his chair squeaked. At the center of the phalanx was Silvio Rinaldi. Chloe had never seen him this close. She had seen him from a distance, stepping out of limousines or walking swiftly to the private elevator bank, always surrounded by a wall of bodies. He was the owner of the building, the owner of the city blocks surrounding it, and, if the whispers in the break room were true, the owner of half the politicians in the state. Chloe shrank back, trying to make herself as small as the floor buffer would allow. She kept her head down, staring at the reflection of the overhead recessed lighting on the black stone. She prayed he would just walk to the elevators, but he stopped. Silvio paused in the center of the lobby, his head tilting slightly. The men around him, Marco, she remembered hearing one called, and another named Franco, stopped instantly, their eyes scanning the perimeter like programmed turrets. "The floor is wet," Silvio said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth but carrying an edge of gravel, like tires rolling over crushed stone. "Why is the cleaning crew still here?" Jerry, the night guard, stammered. Mr. Rinaldi. Short-staffed tonight, sir. She's just finishing up." Chloe felt the weight of his gaze land on her. It wasn't the lecherous look she got from the day-shift bankers, nor the dismissive glance of the executives. It was a physical pressure. She forced herself to look up, knowing that avoiding his eyes might seem suspicious. Silvio Rinaldi had eyes the color of aged whiskey, golden brown and startlingly clear. They were intelligent, cold, and currently narrowed in assessment. He wasn't looking at her uniform or her figure. He was looking at her face. He took a step toward her. "You are shaking." It wasn't a question. It was an observation of fact. "I'm fine, sir," Chloe managed to say. Her voice sounded foreign to her own ears, thin and reedy. The world tilted violently to the left. She gripped the handle of the buffer so hard her fingernails ached. "Just finishing." "You are not fine," Silvio stated, taking another step. He was close now. She could smell him. Not the cloying cologne of the men she usually encountered, but something clean and sharp. Rainwater, starched cotton, and something darker, like sandalwood and cold steel. The static in Chloe's vision expanded, eating up the periphery. The black marble floor seemed to rise up like a wave. She realized with a detached horror that she couldn't feel her feet anymore. The glucose in her brain had depleted below the critical line. The adrenaline that had kept her standing in the presence of the boss was evaporating. "Lily," she thought. "I have to tell him about Lily before I need—" She started, but her tongue felt too large for her mouth. The last thing she saw was Silvio Rinaldi's brow furrowing, the impassive mask slipping just a fraction as he realized she wasn't intimidated. She was dying. Then, the lights went out. Chloe didn't feel the impact. She simply ceased to support her own weight. Her hands slipped from the machine, and she crumpled. Silvio Rinaldi watched the woman fall. He moved before his brain had fully processed the command. His reflexes, honed by years of living in a world where hesitation meant a bullet in the chest, propelled him forward. But he was too far away to catch her before she hit the ground. She landed with a sickeningly soft thud on the polished stone. "Boss!" Marco barked, stepping in front of Silvio, his hand instinctively going to the weapon concealed under his jacket. He assumed a threat. A sniper. A poison. Something that had taken the woman down. "Stand down," Silvio ordered, his voice cracking like a whip. He ignored his security detail and knelt beside the fallen woman. He reached out, placing 2 fingers against the pulse point of her neck. It was there, but it was racing, thready, and erratic. "Get the car around," Silvio commanded without looking up. "And call Dr. Rossi. Tell him to prep the clinic." "Sir, should we call 911? Franco asked, hovering uncertainly. "No," Silvio said. "Ambulance response time in this district is 12 minutes. She doesn't have 12 minutes. He was sliding his arms under her shoulders and knees, preparing to lift her, when a sound stopped him dead. It was a small, terrified gasp. Silvio froze. The lobby was supposed to be empty. Jerry was at the desk. His men were around him. The sound had come from behind the reception island. Marco spun around, weapon half drawn. "Show yourself!" From the shadows behind the obsidian desk, a small figure emerged. Silvio felt a strange sensation in his chest, a tightening he wasn't accustomed to. He looked from the child to the woman in his arms. The connection instantaneous and undeniable. The girl didn't run away. She didn't scream for help. She ran straight toward the danger. She ran to him. Marco stepped to intercept her, his massive frame blocking her path. "Hey kid, stay back." The girl dodged Marco with a surprising agility and skidded to a halt right next to Silvio. She didn't look at the gun under Marco's arm. She didn't look at the imposing height of the men. She looked only at her mother. Then she reached out a tiny, trembling hand and tugged on the fabric of Silvio's pants, right at the knee. "Sir," she whispered, her voice trembling but clear in the echo chamber of the lobby. "Sir, my mom's not waking up." The words hung in the air, heavy and devastating. Silvio looked down at the child. He saw the raw fear in her face, but beneath it, a steely pragmatism that no child should possess. She wasn't crying hysterically. She was asking for a solution. He felt the blood drain from his own face. For a man who had ordered hits, negotiated wars between crime families, and stood unmoved at funerals, this small, broken plea struck him with the force of a physical blow. "Bring me to her," he said. It wasn't a question to the child, but a command to the universe. He turned his attention back to the woman, Chloe. He saw it now, slipping out from under the cuff of her sleeve as he shifted her weight. A silver medical bracelet. He twisted her wrist gently to read the engraving. Type 1. Diabetes. Insulin-dependent. Hypoglycemic shock, Silvio muttered. He knew the signs. His uncle had died of it because he was too proud to carry candy. He looked back at the girl. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice softening, shedding the gravel he reserved for his soldiers. "Lily," she squeaked. "Lily," Silvio said, maintaining intense eye contact. "Your mother is sick. Her sugar is low. Do you have food? Juice?" Lily shook her head frantically, tears finally spilling over. "We ate the bread. She gave it to me. She said she wasn't hungry." The admission landed like a stone. "She gave it to me." Silvio's jaw tightened until his teeth ached. He stood up, lifting Chloe effortlessly into his arms. Her head lolled against his chest, staining the lapel of his $3,000 suit with sweat and floor polish. He didn't even blink. "Franco?" Silvio barked. "Get the girl." Gently. "Sir?" Franco looked baffled. "We're taking the kid? We aren't leaving her here." Silvio snapped, the danger in his voice flaring up. "Move." Franco holstered his weapon and awkwardly extended a hand to Lily. Lily hesitated, looking at her unconscious mother in the arms of the strange, dark-haired giant. "I have her, Lily," Silvio said, looking directly at the child. "I have your mother. I will not let her fall. Come." Lily seemed to sense the truth in his tone. She nodded once, wiped her nose on her sleeve, and took Franco's hand. Silvio strode toward the exit, his long legs eating up the distance. Jerry the guard was standing up, looking terrified. "Mr. Rinaldi, I didn't know the kid was there. I swear." "Open the door, Jerry." Silvio cut him off calmly. "And if you speak a word of this to anyone, you won't find work cleaning toilets in this city. Understood?" "Yes, sir. Understood, sir." The cold night air hit them as they exited the building. The rain was coming down in sheets now, blurring the streetlights into streaks of neon. The black armored SUV was waiting at the curb, engine idling. Silvio settled Chloe onto the leather bench seat, keeping her head elevated. He climbed in beside her, refusing to let go, keeping one arm securely around her shoulders to steady her. Franco lifted Lily into the jump seat opposite them. "Go," Silvio ordered. "Dr. Rossi. Tell him I'm bringing a diabetic coma case. I want glucose IVs ready the second we walk in the door." As the car peeled away from the curb, merging into the wet traffic, Silvio looked down at the woman. In the intermittent flashes of passing streetlights, her face was ghost pale. He could feel the cold radiating off her skin. Across the cabin, Lily was watching him with wide, unblinking eyes. She was shivering. Silvio reached for the control panel on the armrest and cranked the heat up to maximum. Then, without a word, he shrugged out of his suit jacket, a difficult maneuver while holding an unconscious woman, and tossed the heavy, expensive wool across the aisle. "Put that on," he told the girl. Lily hesitated, then pulled the jacket over her shoulders. It swallowed her whole, the sleeves hanging down past her hands. She pulled it tight, burying her nose in the lapel that smelled of him. "Is she going to die?" Lily asked. Her voice was small, barely audible over the hum of the tires on wet pavement. Silvio looked at the woman. He felt the faint, frantic flutter of her heart against his ribs. He thought of the file his team would inevitably compile on her by morning. The debts, the brother, the struggle that had led her to pass out on a marble floor at 2 a.m. He looked back at the girl. "No," Silvio said. "Not tonight." He tightened his grip on Chloe Evans. He didn't know who she was, not really. He didn't know why she mattered. But as the car sped through the dark arteries of the city, carrying them toward his private sanctuary, Silvio Rinaldi knew one thing with absolute certainty. He had just picked up a problem he wasn't going to put down. The SUV turned a sharp corner, and Chloe's head shifted, resting more securely in the crook of his neck. Her breathing was shallow, hitched with small sounds of distress even in her sleep. Silvio found his own breathing syncing with hers, a subconscious attempt to keep her tethered to the world. "Drive faster," he said to Anthony, his voice low and dangerous. The city blurred past them, a wash of rain and light. as the Mafia boss held the cleaner and her daughter in the back seat of his armored car, racing against a clock he had decided to smash. Consciousness returned to me not with a jolt, but as a slow, rhythmic tide washing over dry sand. The first thing I registered was the silence. It wasn't the heavy, suffocating silence of the basement apartment I shared with Lily, where I would lie awake listening for the sound of breaking glass or shouting neighbors. This silence was thick, insulated, and expensive. The second thing was the smell. It didn't smell like the county hospital emergency room. That distinct cocktail of bleach, old coffee, and human misery. This air was crisp, filtered, smelling faintly of citrus and sterilized steel. I wasn't in a hospital ward. I was in a suite that looked more like a 5-star hotel room if hotels came equipped with cardiac monitors and intravenous drips. I was lying in a bed with linens so soft they felt like water against my skin. There was a faint beep, steady and reassuring, coming from the machine to my left. A clear tube ran from a bag of saline and glucose into the back of my hand. Panic, cold and sharp, spiked in my chest. Lily. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like it had been filled with lead shot. The movement set off a faster beeping on the monitor. "She is asleep," a voice said from the shadows. "Do not wake her." I froze. My head turned toward the corner of the room. A wingback leather chair was positioned there, and in it sat the man from the lobby, Silvio Rinaldi. He wasn't wearing his jacket anymore. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, the sleeves rolled up to his elbows, revealing forearms that looked like they were carved from marble. He held a tablet in one hand, the blue light from the screen illuminating the sharp angles of his face. His eyes, that strange and piercing color of amber whiskey, were fixed on me. I followed his gaze to a velvet sofa against the far wall. A small lump was curled there, completely buried under a dark charcoal suit jacket. A tuft of blonde hair poked out from the collar. Lily. She was motionless, breathing the deep, even breaths of the truly safe. The air left my lungs in a rush. She was here. She was okay. "I didn't call Child Protective Services," Silvio said, answering the question I hadn't voiced yet. He set the tablet down on a side table. "And I didn't take her to a precinct. She has been sleeping for 4 hours. She ate a club sandwich and drank a glass of milk before passing out." "Thank you," I said. My voice was raspy, unused, for the insulin, for Lily. Silvio watched me, his expression unreadable. "You were in ketoacidosis. Another hour, and your organs would have started shutting down. You have type 1 diabetes. It is a manageable condition, Ms. Evans. Why are you managing it like a death wish?" "Insulin costs money," I said simply. "Rent costs money. Food costs money. Sometimes the math doesn't work. So you starve yourself to feed the child, and you ration your medicine to pay the rent." He stated it like a line item on a ledger. A noble strategy. Except if you die, the child goes to the state, and the state does not care about her. Silvio stood up. He was even taller in the small room than he had seemed in the lobby. He walked toward the bed, his movements quiet and controlled. He stopped a few feet away, crossing his arms over his chest. "You think I brought you here to collect a medical bill?" he asked. "I think nothing in this world is free, Mr. Rinaldi," I replied. "Especially not from men like you. I prefer to know my debt up front." A flicker of something crossed his face. Surprise? Amusement? It was gone too fast to tell. "Chloe Evans," Silvio read from memory. "Age 26. Sole guardian of Lily Evans. Former address, 422 West Grover Street. Current address, unknown, likely squatting or staying in unauthorized sublets. Employment, night shift cleaning crew, Rinaldi Tower." He paused. The room felt suddenly colder. "And sister to Brandon Evans." The name hit me harder than the hypoglycemia had. I flinched physically, my hands curling into fists in the sheets. "I don't speak to him," I said quickly, my heart rate spiking the monitor again. "I haven't seen Brandon in 6 months. Whatever he did, whatever he owes, it has nothing to do with me or Lily. It has everything to do with you," Silvio corrected. His voice dropped an octave, losing the clinical detachment. "Your brother didn't just borrow money, Chloe. He stole a shipment of narcotics from the O'Sullivan family, the Irish mob. I felt the blood drain from my face. Brandon had always been a screw-up, a gambler, a petty thief. But stealing from the O'Sullivans? That was suicide. He fled the state, Silvio continued. But Patrick O'Sullivan is not a man who forgives theft. When he couldn't find Brandon, he started looking for leverage. He started looking for you. That's why we moved, I whispered. I knew people were asking about him. I didn't know it was them. They know you work in my building, Silvio said. My security team intercepted a scout 2 nights ago. They were waiting for you to leave your shift. They weren't planning to ask you nicely where your brother is. They were planning to take you and the girl to make Brandon come out of hiding. I looked over at Lily, sleeping peacefully under the suit jacket, the image of men taking her, hurting her to get to a brother I already despised, made bile rise in my throat. I felt sick, trapped. Why are you telling me this? I asked, looking back at Silvio. If the O'Sullivans want me, why did you intervene? We're nothing to you. A janitor and a nuisance. Silvio pulled the chair closer and sat down again, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees. The proximity was overwhelming. He smelled of power and danger, yet his eyes were strangely steady. Because the O'Sullivans burned down your old apartment building last night, he revealed. I gasped. What? He paused, letting the reality sink in. I was homeless. I was broke. I was being hunted by a crime syndicate because of my idiot brother. And I was currently lying in the private clinic of the city's most dangerous rival boss. You have 2 options, Silvio said. Option 1, I discharge you. You take the girl, and you run. Maybe you make it to a shelter. Maybe you get a bus ticket. But Patrick O'Sullivan has reach. If he finds you, and he will, you will not survive. And option 2? I asked, my voice trembling. You work off your debt. I blinked. I told you I can clean. I don't need a cleaner. He interrupted. I have an army of cleaners. I need a housekeeper. For my private residence. I stared at him. Your house? My penthouse, he clarified. It is a fortress. Secure access only. My previous staff quit. They find the environment stressful. They worry about the risks of my profession. They ask too many questions, or they see things they shouldn't and panic. He looked at me with a calculating intensity. He gestured to the room. The position comes with full room and board in the staff quarters of the penthouse. It includes a salary. It includes medical supplies for your condition. He pointed to Lily. And it includes 24-hour protection for the child. It sounded too good to be true. It sounded like a trap. A live-in maid for a mafia boss, I said, testing the words. In the middle of a war with the Irish. I am not asking you to fight the war, Silvio said calmly. I am asking you to iron my shirts and ensure there is food in the refrigerator. And in exchange, I ensure no one touches a hair on your daughter's head. I looked at Lily again. Then I looked at the IV in my arm. I thought about the cold streets, the fear of every shadow, the constant hunger. Then I looked at Silvio Rinaldi. I have conditions, I said. Silvio raised an eyebrow. You are in no position to negotiate, Ms. Evans. Agreed, Silvio said immediately. Silvio's lips quirked up in the ghost of a smile. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less severe. I do not sleep with the staff, Chloe. It's messy. You are safe from me. And third, I said, I need an advance. For clothes. For her. We have nothing. Done, he said. Your brother's debt is not yours, but your safety is now my responsibility. If you agree. I closed my eyes for a moment. I was selling my freedom, perhaps my soul, to a criminal, but the alternative was a shallow grave for me and an orphanage for Lily. I opened my eyes. When do I start? Silvio stood up and buttoned his cuffs. The shift in his demeanor was instant. The negotiation was over. The boss was back. Now, he said. Dr. Rossi will clear you in an hour. My driver will take you to pick up whatever meager belongings you have left at your current squat. Then you come to the penthouse. He walked over to the sofa and looked down at Lily. For a second, his expression softened again. That strange, unreadable look returning. He reached down and adjusted the jacket where it had slipped off her shoulder. "She needs a winter coat," he murmured, almost to himself. "That jacket is too thin." He turned back to me at the door. "Welcome to the family, Chloe. Try not to die on my floor again. It ruins the marble." With that, he walked out, leaving me in the silence of the expensive room. But as I watched Lily sleep, safe and warm, her cheeks pink instead of pale, I knew I had made the only choice that mattered. I wasn't the prey anymore. I was the keeper of the lair, and if Silvio Rinaldi thought I was just going to be a silent ghost in his house, he was about to learn that survivors made the loudest noise of all. 2 hours later, the reality of the situation set in. The discharge process had been a blur of efficiency. Dr. Rossi, a short, balding man with kind eyes and nervous hands, had given me a prescription for 3 months' worth of insulin and a lecture on stress management that I barely heard. Anthony, the driver, was waiting. He was a mountain of a man with a broken nose and ears that looked like cauliflower, but he held the car door open for me with a surprising gentleness. "Boss says we go to your place first," Anthony grunted as he merged onto the highway. I made Anthony wait in the car. I didn't want him to see it. I didn't want the judgment. "Mommy, are we moving again?" Lily asked as we climbed the graffiti-stained stairs. She was clutching her doll, Mr. Bear, who was missing an eye. "Yes, baby," I said, unlocking the 3 deadbolts on our door. "But this time is different. This time it's somewhere nice." "Is the tall man going to be there?" she asked. "I like him," Lily decided, picking up a coloring book. "He smells good." And he gave me his coat. "He's a dangerous man, Lily," I warned her, kneeling down to zip up her parka. "We have to be very good. We have to be quiet and polite. We can't run in the halls, okay?" "Okay," she chirped, unbothered. Children were resilient. They accepted the unacceptable because they had no context for normal. We left the apartment 10 minutes later. I left the key under the mat. I didn't leave a note. There was no one to say goodbye to. The drive to the city center was silent. As we approached Rinaldi Tower, I craned my neck to look up. It pierced the sky, a monolith of glass and steel. I had spent 6 months cleaning its lobby, looking at the floor. Now I was going to the top. The private elevator was a revelation. It didn't have buttons. It required a key card and a fingerprint scan, which Anthony provided. The ascent was so smooth I barely felt it, but my ears popped as we passed the 50th floor. When the doors opened, I stepped into a world I didn't know existed. "Understood," I said. Anthony nodded and left, the elevator swallowing him back up. I stood there with a garbage bag of clothes in one hand and Lily's hand in the other. "Wow," Lily breathed. She dropped my hand and ran toward the window. "Mommy, look, the cars look like ants." "Lily, be careful," I hissed, rushing after her. "Let her look," a voice said. I spun around. Silvio was standing on the balcony above the living area, leaning against the glass railing. He had changed into a black sweater and jeans, looking less like a CEO and more like something darker, more casual, but equally lethal. "The glass is bulletproof," he said, descending the floating staircase. "And shatter-resistant. She cannot break it." He reached the bottom of the stairs and walked toward us. The sheer size of the space made him seem even more imposing. He stopped a few feet away, his gaze sweeping over my garbage bag luggage. He didn't sneer, but his jaw tightened. "I will have a stylist come tomorrow," he said, "to get you appropriate uniforms and clothes for the child." "I have clothes," I said defensively. "You have rags," he corrected, not unkindly. "My staff represents me. You cannot answer my door looking like a refugee." He turned to Lily, who was pressing her nose against the glass. "Do you like the view, little one?" Lily turned around, her eyes wide. "It's really high." "Are you a king?" I choked on a gasp. "Lily." Silvio laughed. It was a low, rusty sound, like he hadn't used it in a long time. "No, I am not a king, I am a landlord. It is much less romantic." He looked at me. "Your quarters are prepared. The kitchen is fully stocked. I eat dinner at 8 p.m. I prefer Italian cuisine. Simple. No heavy creams. Can you cook?" "I can cook," I said. "My grandmother was Italian." "Good. Then prove it." He checked his watch, a piece of metal and gears that probably cost more than my entire life's earnings. "You have 2 hours. Impress me." He turned and walked toward a heavy oak door at the end of the hall, his study. Before he entered, he paused. "And Chloe?" "Yes?" "Lock the front door. The code is 9247. Do not open it for anyone who does not have a key card. If the alarm sounds, go to the panic room in the pantry. Anthony will show you later." Is someone coming?" I asked, the fear creeping back in. Silvio looked at me, his face shadowed. "Someone is always coming, Chloe. That is why you are here." He closed the door. The lock clicked with a heavy final sound. I stood alone in the middle of the $1 million living room. I looked at Lily, who was now spinning in circles on the polished floor, delighted by the space. I looked at the dark city below. I wasn't safe. I knew that. I had just traded a wolf for a dragon, but as I walked toward the kitchen, dragging my bag of belongings, I felt a strange sense of resolve. I had a job. I had insulin. I had a locked door. Tears pricked my eyes, hot and sudden. I blinked them away furiously. I didn't have time to cry. I had to cook. I rolled up the sleeves of my worn flannel shirt. I washed my hands. I took out a knife and a cutting board. Silvio Rinaldi wanted a meal? I would give him the best damn meal he had ever eaten. I would make myself indispensable. I would make this fortress so comfortable, so efficient, that he would never be able to let us go. The scent of rosemary and roasting garlic had finally managed to conquer the sterile, chemical smell of lemon furniture polish that used to permeate the penthouse. It had been 3 weeks since I walked into Silvio Rinaldi's fortress, dragging a garbage bag of clothes and a terrified 6-year-old. 3 weeks of sleeping in a bed that didn't smell like mildew. 3 weeks of insulin waiting in a dedicated drawer in the refrigerator, and 3 weeks of looking over my shoulder every time the elevator chimed. "Mommy, look at this one." I turned to see Lily sitting at the kitchen island, her legs swinging back and forth, nowhere near touching the floor. She was drawing on the back of some high-grade printer paper Marco had given her. "It's a dragon," she explained, pointing to a green blob with wings. "He lives on the roof. He eats the bad guys." I forced a smile, drying my hands on a towel. "That's a very scary dragon, Lil. Make sure he stays on the paper, okay?" "He's not scary," she corrected me, her tone matter of fact. "He just protects the castle." The digital clock on the oven read 6:45 p.m. Silvio was early. Usually the master of the house didn't return until well past 8, sometimes 9. I would leave a plate covered in the warming drawer and retreat to my quarters. But lately, the elevator had been chiming earlier and earlier. I smoothed the front of my tunic and checked the roast in the oven. It was a braised beef with carrots and potatoes. Simple, hearty, and exactly what he had asked for. No foams, no tiny portions, just food. Marco followed him in, looking equally grim, whispering something into his earpiece before taking up his position by the door. "Good evening, Mr. Rinaldi," I said, keeping my voice neutral. Silvio stopped in the middle of the living room, taking a deep breath. His whiskey-colored eyes found me instantly. They weren't angry, just heavy. "It smells like a home in here," he said, his voice rough. "I keep expecting it to smell like bleach." "Bleach gives me a headache," I replied, moving to set the table. "Dinner will be ready in 10 minutes. Do you want a drink?" "Water," he said, walking toward the kitchen island. He stopped next to Lily, who froze for a second before beaming up at him. "Hi, Mr. Silvio," she chirped. "Hello, Piccolina," he replied. He looked at her drawing. "Is that me?" Lily giggled. "No, that's a dragon. You don't have wings." "True," Silvio murmured, leaning against the counter. He looked at me, watching as I pulled the heavy Dutch oven out of the stove. "You look tired, Chloe. Is the workload too much? I can hire a secondary for the laundry." "I'm fine," I said quickly. "The workload is manageable. I'm just keeping busy." I wasn't tired from cleaning. I was tired from vigilance. Every window in this place was bulletproof. Every door was reinforced. But I still woke up 3 times a night to check that the locks were engaged. I was tired of wondering when the war Silvio was fighting would spill onto these polished floors. He sat down at the head of the table. I served him in silence. The steam from the beef rose between us. "You should eat," he said, gesturing to the empty chair across from him. "I eat with Lily in the kitchen." I recited the rule I had set for myself. Staff does not eat with the employer. Silvio picked up his fork, stabbing a potato with more force than necessary. "There are no witnesses here, Chloe. Sit down. I hate eating alone. It reminds me of prison." The word hung in the air. Prison. A reminder of where he came from and where he could send people. I hesitated, then plated a smaller portion for myself and sat down. Lily had already eaten and was happily distracted by her drawing. For a few minutes, the only sound was the clinking of silverware. The beef was tender, falling apart at the touch of the fork. Silvio ate with a focused intensity, like a man who often forgot to fuel his body until it was critical. "The O'Sullivans are getting desperate," he said suddenly. I froze, my fork halfway to my mouth. I hadn't expected him to bring work to the dinner table. "Marco found a tracker on one of the delivery trucks this morning," Silvio continued, his tone conversational, as if discussing the weather. "They are trying to map our supply routes. They are trying to find weaknesses." I set my fork down. My appetite vanished. "Does that mean they know we're here?" "They suspect," Silvio said. He looked at me, his gaze piercing. "They know I have a new housekeeper. They don't know it's Brandon's sister. Yet, my brother," I said, the word tasting like ash, "is a liability I thought I left behind. Blood is sticky, Chloe. It doesn't wash off." He took a sip of water. "But you are safe here. The building is a fortress." "Fortresses can be breached," I pointed out, "especially if there's a Trojan horse." Silvio stopped eating. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Are you calling yourself a Trojan horse?" "I'm calling myself a target," I said, "and targets get hit. I just want to make sure Lily isn't in the splash zone." "She isn't," he said firmly. "I have doubled the perimeter guard. Marco sleeps in the unit across the hall. No one gets in without my permission." He stood up, signaling the end of the conversation. "The food was excellent. Thank you." He walked toward his study, the tension radiating off his shoulders in waves. I watched him go, feeling a mix of gratitude and terror. He was protecting us, yes, but he was also the reason we needed protection. Later that night, after I had tucked Lily into bed and read her 3 chapters of a story about a brave mouse, I went out to the living room to collect the water glasses. The penthouse was dim, lit only by the city lights below and the soft glow of the hallway sconces. I heard low voices near the elevator vestibule. Security feed loops were tampered with on the service level. Marco's voice was a low rumble. Just for 30 seconds, but it was enough for someone to slip a package in. "Did we find it?" Silvio's voice was colder than ice. "Yes. It was a dead rat wrapped in an Irish flag, left in the mailroom sort facility. It's a warning, boss. They are getting close to the building's internal systems." "Find the leak," Silvio ordered. "Someone on the inside took a bribe. Find them, and make an example of them. I don't care if it's the head of security or the janitor. No one sells access to my home." "Understood." "And the girl?" Marco asked. If they breach the lobby, the lockdown protocol engages. The elevators seal, the stairwells magnetize. They would have to blow the building up to get to this floor. And if they do blow the building up?" Marco asked grimly. There was a silence. "Then we die," Silvio said. "But they die with us." I backed away silently, my heart hammering against my ribs. A dead rat. Tampered cameras. The war wasn't just out there, it was clawing at the doors. I didn't go to my room. I went to the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and then walked straight to where Marco was standing guard by the front door after Silvio had retreated to his study. Marco looked at me surprised. He was a giant of a man, with a face that looked like it had been chiseled out of granite and then dropped a few times. He usually ignored me. "Ms. Evans," he nodded. "You should be asleep. I need you to teach me," I said. Marco blinked. "Teach you what? How to polish silver? I think you have that covered." "I need you to teach me the lockdown codes," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the trembling in my hands. "I need to know how to seal the panic room. I need to know how to override the elevator if the system is hacked. And I need to know where the backup generator panel is. Marco's expression shifted from dismissal to suspicion. He crossed his massive arms. Those are security protocols, Ms. Evans. Only Mr. Rinaldi and the senior guard staff have that clearance. Why are you asking? You're a housekeeper. Marco scoffed. Your job is to keep the dust off the furniture. Marco's eyes narrowed. You were listening. I have ears, I said. Are you going to teach me? Or do I have to figure it out by trial and error when the Irish kick down the door? He's not going to teach you. The voice came from behind me. I spun around. Silvio was standing in the doorway of his study, holding a tumbler of amber liquid. He had heard everything. I straightened my spine. I didn't apologize. I didn't look down. Then you teach me. Silvio studied me for a long, agonizing moment. He took a slow sip of his drink, his eyes scanning my face for any sign of deception. He was looking for the traitor, the leak. But all he found was a desperate mother. Marco, Silvio said quietly, go to the security station. Run a diagnostic on the perimeter sensors. Boss, you want me to leave you alone with her? Marco asked, eyeing me warily. She weighs 120 pounds and is armed with a dish towel, Silvio said dryly. I think I'll survive. Go. Marco nodded once, shot me a warning glare, and disappeared into the elevator. Silvio walked toward me. He didn't stop at a polite distance. He kept coming until he was standing right in front of me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. You want to know how to lock us in, he said. I want to know how to keep them out, I corrected. Come with me. He turned and walked back into his study. I hesitated for a fraction of a second, then followed. Silvio walked to a mahogany desk and opened a drawer. He pulled out 2 items, a sleek black smartphone and a heavy, matte gray key card. I took the phone. It felt cold and heavy. This card, he continued, holding up the gray plastic, is a level 2 clearance key. It will open the panic room in the pantry. It will also lock down the residential elevator manually. If you swipe this across the reader inside the car, the elevator freezes between floors. No one gets up. No one gets down. I took the card. Thank you. I'm not done, he said. He reached into the drawer again. This time, when his hand came out, it was holding a gun. It was a compact semi-automatic, black and deadly looking. My breath hitched in my throat. I had never touched a gun in my life. I hated them. They were the reason the neighborhood I grew up in was a cemetery. Silvio ejected the magazine with a fluid motion, checked the chamber to ensure it was empty, and then placed it on the desk between us. Pick it up, he ordered. I stared at the weapon. I don't like guns. The men coming for your brother don't care what you like, Silvio said, his voice hard. They will have guns, big ones. And if Marco is down, and I am down, and they are coming through that door for Lily, are you going to throw a vase at them? The image was visceral. Lily, cornered. Me, helpless. I reached out and picked up the gun. It was heavier than it looked. Cold steel. It felt alien in my hand. Your grip is wrong, Silvio said. His skin was warm, his fingers calloused and rough. He adjusted my grip, forcing my thumbs into the correct position, molding my hands around the weapon. Relax your shoulders, he instructed. If you are tense, you will miss, and you cannot afford to miss. I exhaled, trying to drop my shoulders. He kept his hands over mine, guiding the barrel of the gun to point at a bust of Caesar on the bookshelf. You don't aim for the leg, Silvio said softly. You don't aim for the hand to shoot the knife away. That happens in movies. In real life, under stress, you aim for center mass, the chest, the biggest target. I can't kill someone, I whispered. You are a mother, Silvio said, his voice vibrating against my spine. You will be surprised what you can do. If a wolf has your child in its teeth, you don't negotiate. You tear its throat out. He removed his hand slowly, leaving my skin tingling where he had touched me. The absence of his warmth was sudden and jarring. Keep the gun, he said, stepping back. It's loaded with hollow points now that I've put the magazine back in. There is no safety lever on this model. The safety is your finger. Do not put your finger on the trigger unless you intend to fire. I looked at him. holding the weapon that could end a life. I felt sick, but I also felt something else. Empowered. Where do I keep it? I asked. In the panic room, he said. On the top shelf, where Lily cannot reach. If you are in there, it means the worst has happened. And if the door starts to open, and it isn't me or Marco, I aim for center mass. I finished for him. Silvio nodded. His eyes held a flicker of respect that hadn't been there before. He wasn't looking at me like a servant anymore. He was looking at me like a soldier he had just conscripted. Go to bed, Chloe, he said, and lock your door. I turned to leave, clutching the phone, the key card, and the gun. Silvio? I said, pausing at the door. It was the first time I had used his first name without the Mr. prefix. He looked up from the desk. Thank you for not treating me like a victim. You aren't a victim, he said, turning back to his screens. Victims wait to be saved. You just asked for the keys to the castle. I walked back to my quarters, my legs feeling steadier than they had in weeks. I went into the small pantry inside our suite, climbed on a step stool, and placed the gun on the highest shelf, hidden behind a box of cereal. I went into Lily's room. She was asleep, clutching her dragon drawing. I kissed her forehead, then sat on the edge of her bed for a long time, stroking her hair. I touched the encrypted phone in my pocket. I traced the edge of the key card, but as I closed my eyes, the image that lingered wasn't the gun or the threat. It was the way he had looked at Lily's drawing, the way he had eaten my roast beef like a starving man. He was a monster to the world, a killer, a criminal. And that, I realized with a jolt of true fear, was far more dangerous than any gun he could have given me, because a gun could only kill my body. A man like that could destroy everything else. She needs vitamin D, Chloe, Silvio said, standing by the kitchen island. He was dressed in a way that was disorienting. Dark denim jeans and a navy polo shirt that fit him like a second skin. It was the most casual I had ever seen him. Yet he still looked like he owned the oxygen in the room. She has been inside for 3 weeks. She is starting to look like a ghost. I looked at Lily, who was currently building a fortress out of Tupperware containers on the living room rug. Her skin was indeed pale, bordering on translucent. It's not safe, I argued, though my resolve was weakening. I wiped down a counter that was already gleaming. You said the O'Sullivans are escalating. You said they left a rat in the mailroom. I have 5 men on the perimeter, he said quietly. Franco and Marco will be with us. I will be with us. Do you trust me to keep her safe? It was a loaded question. Did I trust the head of a crime family to protect my child? Logically, it was insane. But emotionally, looking at the way he had watched over us for the last month, the answer was terrifyingly simple. I trust you, I admitted. It's the rest of the world I'm worried about. Go get dressed, he ordered gently. Wear something that isn't a uniform. We are not going as staff and employer. We are going as a group. I went to my room and stared at the closet. The stylist Silvio had hired had filled it with clothes I was terrified to touch. Silks, cashmeres, linens. I bypassed the navy blues and the blacks, reaching for a dress made of sage green cotton. It was simple, buttoning up the front with a modest neckline and a skirt that allowed for movement. It felt like something the old Chloe would have worn before the debts and the fear. I checked my blood sugar on the new continuous monitor Silvio had purchased. 110 megatias DL. Stable. I grabbed the encrypted phone and slipped it into the deep pocket of the dress. I hesitated by the pantry door where the gun was hidden, a fleeting urge to grab it pulsing through me. But I couldn't take a weapon into a private park. I had to rely on the men in suits. When I walked back out, Lily was already bouncing by the door, wearing a floral sundress and the new white sneakers Anthony had bought her. We're going to see ducks, she squealed. Ready? He asked. As I'll ever be, I replied. The convoy was heavy. 2 black SUVs. We rode in the middle vehicle. The drive uptown was tense, at least for me. I watched every car that pulled up alongside us, my eyes scanning for sudden movements or tinted windows rolling down. Silvio sat relaxed, one hand resting on his knee, discussing something in low Italian with Marco, who was driving. We arrived at the estate 15 minutes later. It wasn't a park in the public sense. It was a manicured garden locked behind 12-foot iron gates covered in ivy. A security guard in a blazer stepped out of a booth, checked Marco's ID, glanced in the back, paled slightly when he saw Silvio, and opened the gates immediately. The SUV rolled onto a gravel drive lined with ancient oaks. It was a pocket of silence in the middle of the screaming city. "Stay close," Silvio murmured as he opened my door. The air smelled of cut grass and damp earth, a welcome change from the filtered air of the penthouse. Lily took off immediately, running toward a pristine wooden swing set in the distance. "Franco!" Silvio barked. Franco was already moving, jogging lightly to position himself between Lily and the tree line. Marco stayed by the car, scanning the entrance. We walked toward the playground. It was surreal. To anyone watching from the high-rise windows overlooking the garden, we looked like a family. A wealthy, powerful father, a mother, and their child. The lie was so seductive I almost let myself trip into it. "Push me!" Lily yelled, climbing onto a swing. I moved to help her, but Silvio beat me to it. He took off his sunglasses, hooking them into his neckline, and stepped behind the swing. I watched a gray sedan drive past slowly. It didn't stop. I watched a man in a jogging suit stretch against a lamppost. He looked at his watch, stretched his hamstrings, and jogged away. "You are vibrating." Silvio's voice came from right behind me. I jumped slightly. He had left Lily swinging to stand next to me. "I don't like it," I murmured. "It's too open. The fence. Anyone can see through it. The glass in the townhouses is reflective," Silvio reassured me, stepping closer so his arm brushed mine. "And the street is monitored by NYPD cameras. The O'Sullivans are bold, Chloe, but they aren't stupid. They won't try a hit in broad daylight in this zip code. The police response time here is under 2 minutes. My brother stole from them," I reminded him. "Desperation makes people stupid. Lily is happy," he said, nodding toward the swings where Franco was now awkwardly pushing her. "Look at her. She needs this." I looked. She was throwing her head back, laughing at the sky. He was right. She was a child, and I had been forcing her to live like a fugitive. "Okay," I exhaled. "Okay." I tried to force my shoulders down. I sat on the bench, smoothing the green skirt over my knees. Silvio sat next to me, close enough that I could feel the heat of his thigh. "Tell me about the dress," he said, clearly trying to distract me. "It was in the closet," I said. "I didn't choose it." "It suits you," he said, his voice low. "Green is better than that gray uniform. It brings out your eyes." "Silvio," I started, a warning in my tone. "I know," he said, leaning back. "I am the boss. You are the staff. Lines must be drawn. Lines keep us alive," I said. "Lines also keep us lonely," he countered. I looked away, flushing. I turned my gaze back to the street, seeking a distraction from the tension radiating between us. That was when I saw him. But he wasn't looking at the lamp. He was looking through the gap in the ivy, directly at the swings. "Silvio," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "What is it?" He sensed the shift in my demeanor instantly. His hand went to his waist, where I knew a gun was tucked into the waistband of his jeans. "That man," I said, not pointing. "Orange vest. Across the street." Silvio followed my gaze, his body going rigid. "The city worker? He's checking the grid." Silvio didn't dismiss me. He didn't ask if I was sure. He trusted my paranoia. "Marco," he said into his collar mic, his voice ice cold. "Orange vest, 3 o'clock. Assess." He didn't pull out a wrench. He pulled out something long, black, and metal. A submachine gun. "Gun!" I screamed, the sound tearing out of my throat before I even made the decision to yell. I didn't wait for Silvio. I didn't wait for permission. I launched myself off the bench, sprinting toward the swings. "Lily!" The world slowed down. I saw the man across the street raise the weapon. I saw the muzzle flash before I heard the sound. A terrifying zip, zip, zip as bullets chewed through the ivy and pinged off the iron bars of the fence. Franco was already moving, diving to cover Lily with his massive body. "Get down!" Silvio roared behind me, his own weapon drawn. I didn't get down. I ran. I had to get to her. The distance between the bench and the swings felt like miles. Dirt kicked up around my feet as bullets struck the ground, little geysers of gravel exploding into the air. "Mommy!" Lily shrieked, the joy vanishing from her face, replaced by absolute terror. Franco had her on the ground, rolling her behind the thick wooden post of the swing set structure. But the wood was splintering under the hail of fire. I slid into the dirt beside them, ignoring the scrape of gravel against my bare legs. I grabbed Lily, pulling her under me, shielding her head with my arms. "Stay down, baby. Stay down," I chanted, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would crack my ribs. Silvio was returning fire. The boom of his handgun was louder, deeper than the rapid-fire pop of the machine gun. He was standing in the open, using the marble fountain as partial cover, drawing the shooter's attention away from us. "Marco, get the car," Silvio shouted, firing 2 controlled shots. From the street, there was a shout. Then silence. "Target down." Marco's voice crackled over the earpiece I could hear from Franco's ear. "Target neutralized. Second vehicle approaching from the east. We need to move." "Chloe, move," Silvio commanded. He was at my side in an instant, grabbing my arm and hauling me up. I scooped Lily into my arms. She was dead weight, sobbing into my neck. Adrenaline gave me strength I didn't know I possessed. We ran for the SUV. The gravel crunched under our feet. Another burst of gunfire erupted from the street, the second car Marco had warned about. A window in the townhouse next to us shattered. "Inside! Go!" Silvio shoved me toward the open door of the armored car. I threw myself into the back seat, clutching Lily. Silvio dove in right behind me, landing half on top of me as Marco slammed the accelerator. The heavy door was still swinging shut as the car peeled out, gravel spraying like buckshot. "Is she hit?" Silvio demanded, scrambling off me and pulling Lily from my arms to inspect her. His hands were shaking. I had never seen his hands shake. "I'm okay," Lily sobbed, clinging to his shirt. "I want to go home. Check her properly," Silvio snapped at me, his eyes wild. "Check for blood." I ran my hands over Lily's body, checking every inch. No blood, no tears in her dress, just dirt on her knees and terror in her eyes. "She's clear," I said, my voice trembling. "She's not hit." Silvio slumped back against the leather seat, running a hand over his face. He let out a string of Italian curses that were so violent they seemed to darken the air in the car. "Marco," he said, his voice deadly quiet, "get us back to the tower. Then I want the head of the perimeter team on a platter. How did a shooter get that close?" "He was dressed as City Works boss," Marco said from the front, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "He had a permit on the dashboard. It was a good cover." "It was a lazy cover," Silvio roared, slamming his fist against the leather armrest. "If Chloe hadn't seen him—" He didn't finish the sentence. The implication hung heavy in the air. If I hadn't noticed the boots, if I hadn't noticed the clipboard, Lily would be dead. We spent the rest of the drive in silence. Lily eventually cried herself into a hiccuping stupor against my chest. I stared out the window, watching the city blur by. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a cold, nauseating wash of reality. They had found us. The O'Sullivans weren't just looking, they were hunting, and they didn't care about collateral damage. When the car finally pulled into the underground loading dock of Rinaldi Tower, the gates crashing down behind us, the tension didn't break. It solidified. Silvio didn't wait for Anthony to open the door. He kicked it open and stormed out. He didn't offer to carry Lily. He didn't look at me. He walked straight to the elevator, his body radiating a fury so intense it felt like heat. I followed, carrying Lily, who was now half asleep from emotional exhaustion. Marco flanked us, his weapon drawn, scanning the empty garage as if threats could materialize from the concrete. The elevator ride up to the penthouse was suffocating. Silvio stood with his back to us, staring at the steel doors. His fists were clenched at his sides. When the doors opened into the penthouse, he didn't stop. He walked straight to the liquor cabinet, poured a glass of whiskey, and downed it in one swallow. Then he threw the glass into the fireplace. The shatter was loud, sharp, and final. Lily flinched in my arms. "Go to your room," Silvio said. He didn't turn around. His voice was unrecognizable, flat, hollow. "Take the girl. Lock the door." "Lily," I whispered, setting her down. "Go to your room, sweetie. Get Mr. Bear. Mommy will be there in 1 minute." "Is the bad man here?" she whispered. "No," I said firmly. "We are safe. Go." She ran to her room. I waited until I heard her door click shut. Then I walked toward Silvio. "You're bleeding," I said. He looked down at his arm. There was a tear in his polo shirt, a graze from a bullet, or maybe a splinter of wood from the swing set. A line of crimson was running down his bicep. "It's nothing," he spat. "Go away, Chloe. You saved her," I said, ignoring his dismissal. I walked to the first aid kit I kept in the kitchen drawer and brought it over. "I endangered her." He spun around, his eyes blazing. "I took her out there. I insisted on the park. I walked her into a firing squad." "You tried to give her a childhood," I argued, opening an alcohol wipe. "Hold still." I dabbed the wound. He didn't flinch at the sting. "They were waiting," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "They knew we would go to a park eventually. They had scouts at every green space in a 10-mile radius. It was a statistical probability." He looked at me then. Really looked at me. His eyes were haunted. "If you hadn't seen him—" "But I did," I said firmly. I placed a bandage over the cut. "I did see him. Because I know what to look for. Because I'm not just a guest in your house, Silvio. I'm a survivor. And survivors notice the wolves. You are not a guest," he said fiercely. "Not anymore. Today, you acted like a soldier." "I acted like a mother," I corrected him. "Same thing," he murmured. His thumb traced the line of my jaw. My heart was pounding. Not from fear of bullets, but from the raw, magnetic pull of him. This was the moment. The trauma bond, the adrenaline, the shared survival. It was all crashing together. "I won't go," I said. "Why?" He sounded angry, almost pleading. "You saw what happened today. Next time Marco might be too slow. Next time the glass might not be bulletproof. Why would you stay?" Silvio let out a groan that sounded like he was in pain. He dropped his hand from my face and stepped back, putting distance between us as if I burned him. "You think having me is a benefit?" He laughed, a bitter, dark sound. "I am the reason bullets were flying at your daughter's head, Chloe. I am not the hero of this story. I am the villain who got caught in the crossfire. You're not the villain to her," I said softly. "You stood in front of her. You didn't run. You stood." He turned away, walking back to the window to look out at the city that was trying to kill us. "The O'Sullivans have made a mistake," he said, his voice changing. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a cold, hard steel. "They touched my family. They fired on a child under my protection." He placed his hand on the glass. "I'm going to burn their world down for this." I watched him, seeing the transformation. The man who pushed the swing was gone. The dawn was back, and for the first time, I didn't fear him. I felt a savage satisfaction. Let him burn it down. Let him destroy anyone who threatened Lily. "Silvio," I said. He didn't turn. "They know I'm your weakness now," I said, repeating the words I had thought in the car. "They saw you cover us. They saw your panic." He turned then. His face was composed, his eyes dry and hard. "No," he said. "They made a calculation error. They think you are my weakness. They do not understand that you are my priority." He walked back to me, stopping a foot away. "A weakness is something you exploit. A priority is something you die for. There is a difference." He reached out and took my hand. His grip was firm, grounding. "Go to Lily," he said. "I have work to do. I need to make some calls. The streets are going to be loud tonight." I nodded. I squeezed his hand once, then let go. I walked down the hall to Lily's room. She was curled up on her bed with Mr. Bear, staring at the ceiling. "Mommy?" she asked as I lay down beside her. "Are we going to the park again?" "No, baby," I said, pulling her close, smelling the playground dust and sweat in her hair. "We're going to stay inside for a while." "That's okay," she whispered. I like the dragon better anyway. I closed my eyes, listening to the muffled sound of Silvio's voice in the other room, barking orders into the phone. The dragon was awake, and he was breathing fire. I should have been terrified. I should have been packing my bags, but as sleep finally dragged me under, I felt safer than I had in my entire life, because the monster was on our side, and he had just declared war for us. I stood before the full-length mirror in the master bedroom, my hands trembling slightly as I smoothed the material over my hips. The back was entirely open, plunging dangerously low, exposing skin that had rarely seen the sun until the park visit 2 days ago. "Stop fidgeting," a voice commanded from the doorway. "You look like you are waiting for the executioner." "I feel like I'm wearing a costume," I admitted, turning to face him. "This isn't me, Silvio. I'm the woman who cleans the stains out of the carpet, not the one who spills the wine." He stopped in front of me, holding a long velvet box. He didn't ask if I wanted it. He didn't ask if I liked it. He snapped the lid open. "Turn around," he murmured. "It's heavy," I whispered. "It is armor," Silvio corrected, his breath warm against my ear. "When we walk into that ballroom, they will look for fear. They will look for the maid. Instead, they will see the diamonds. They will see the dress. And they will see my hand on your waist. They will know that to touch you is to declare war on God himself." "And Lily?" I asked, the anxiety that never truly left me spiking again. "Are you sure she's safe?" Silvio's expression hardened. "Mrs. Rossi is with her in the media room. She is knitting a sweater and watching cartoons. There are 2 armed guards inside the suite, and 2 more in the elevator lobby. The panic room is prepped. The building is sealed. Lily is safer here than the president is in the White House." "Okay," I exhaled, touching the diamonds. "Okay, let's do this." We left the penthouse not as a family going for a stroll, but as a king and his consort entering a battlefield. The elevator ride down to the garage was silent, the air thick with anticipation. The drive to the Plaza Hotel was a blur of city lights and tension. Marco drove the lead car. We were in the second, with Franco behind the wheel. Silvio didn't speak. He spent the ride checking his phone, his thumb scrolling through messages with lethal speed. I watched him, noting the tension in his jaw, the way his other hand rested on his thigh, inches from mine. "Patrick O'Sullivan will be there," he said suddenly as the hotel came into view. "I assumed as much," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's the annual charity gala, the neutral ground. He won't get a reaction," I promised, channeling every ounce of the cold pragmatism that had kept me alive on the streets. "I dealt with debt collectors and eviction notices for 5 years, Silvio. I know how to look a shark in the eye and not blink." Silvio looked at me then, a flicker of dark pride in his whiskey-colored eyes. He reached out and took my hand, interlacing our fingers. His grip was tight, possessive. "Good, because once we step out of this car, I am not letting you go." Silvio stepped out first, buttoning his jacket. He turned and offered me his hand. As I slid out of the car, the flashbulbs went wild. They didn't know who I was. Chloe Evans, the cleaner. They only saw the woman on Silvio Rinaldi's arm. "Breathe," Silvio murmured, his hand settling on the small of my back, his thumb rubbing circles against the bare skin exposed by the dress. "You own the space. Don't ask for permission to exist." We moved through the crowd. Silvio nodded to men I recognized from the newspapers, a senator, a real estate mogul. He introduced me simply as Chloe, offering no surname, no explanation. It drove them mad. I could see the questions burning in the eyes of the wives and mistresses. "Who is she? Where did he find her?" "Silvio!" a voice boomed. "I didn't think you'd make it after the unpleasantness at the park." A heavy-set man with a cigar in his pocket blocked our path. He had a smile that showed too many teeth. "Don Carlo," Silvio replied smoothly, his grip on my waist tightening imperceptibly. "A little noise in the garden doesn't keep me from charity. You know how I love to give back to the community." "And who is this lovely creature?" Don Carlo asked, his eyes raking over me with a lecherous weight that made me want to shower. "This is Chloe," Silvio said, his tone turning frosty. "And she is not for consumption, Carlo. Keep your eyes on your own plate." He steered me away before the man could respond. We moved deeper into the room, toward the bar. My heart was hammering against my ribs, but I kept my face smooth. "You're doing well," Silvio whispered. "Your pulse is fast, though." "I'm diabetic," I murmured back. "High stress burns sugar. I might need a canapé." Silvio signaled a waiter instantly, taking a small plate of hors d'oeuvres and handing it to me. "Eat. If you faint, I will have to shoot everyone in the room to distract them." I almost smiled. Almost. Patrick O'Sullivan walked in. He spotted us immediately. Of course he did. He had been looking for us. He began to walk toward us, his entourage trailing a few steps behind. The room held its breath. This was the first time the heads of the Rinaldi and O'Sullivan families had been in the same room since the shooting at the park. "Here we go," Silvio breathed. His body became a wall of tension next to mine. "Do not let him touch you." "I won't," I said. Patrick stopped 3 feet away. He held a glass of champagne, looking relaxed, as if he hadn't ordered a hit squad to open fire on a playground 48 hours ago. "Silvio," Patrick said, his voice carrying a lilting Irish brogue that sounded deceptively friendly. "You're looking well, for a man under siege." "Patrick," Silvio replied, his voice flat, "I see you decided to wear white. Brave choice. It shows the bloodstains so clearly." Patrick laughed, a light, airy sound. "Always the dramatist. And this," he turned his cold blue eyes to me, "this must be the famous sister." He took a step closer. I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I looked him dead in the eye. "Chloe, isn't it?" Patrick asked, tilting his head. "I knew your brother well. Brandon. Slippery fellow. Always looking for a shortcut. I suppose it runs in the family? Skipping from the janitor's closet to the penthouse is quite the leap. The insult was designed to humiliate me, to remind me of my place. The old Chloe, the one who apologized for taking up space, would have looked at the floor. But I wasn't wearing a uniform. I was wearing emerald silk and Rinaldi diamonds. "It's Evans," I said, my voice cool and steady, cutting through the ambient noise. "And as for shortcuts, Mr. O'Sullivan, I prefer to think of it as a promotion based on merit. Something you wouldn't understand, inheriting your position." A ripple of shock went through the listeners nearby. No one spoke to Patrick O'Sullivan like that. Patrick's smile tightened at the edges. Sharp tongue. Brandon was more of a whimperer. He cried quite a bit, you know. Especially when he realized no one was coming for him. "My brother made his choices," I said, keeping my face impassive, though the mention of Brandon crying made my stomach turn. "He is a mistake of the past. My present is untouchable." Patrick's eyes narrowed. He looked at the necklace, then at Silvio's hand on my waist. "Untouchable," Patrick repeated, stepping closer, invading my personal space. "That's a bold word, lass. In this city, everything breaks eventually. Even pretty little things in expensive glass towers." He reached out, as if to brush a stray hair from my shoulder. Silvio moved. It was faster than blinking. One moment Silvio was standing beside me. The next his hand was clamped around Patrick's wrist, stopping it inches from my skin. The force of the grip turned Patrick's knuckles white. "Touch her," Silvio said, his voice dropping to a register that was barely human. A growl of pure, unadulterated violence. "And Ireland burns tonight. I will not leave a brick standing. I will not leave a name in the phone book. I will erase you." The music seemed to stop. The people around us pretended to look away, but every ear was strained to catch the words. Patrick stared at Silvio, his smile finally slipping. He saw the truth in Silvio's eyes. This wasn't a business threat. This was a promise of annihilation. Silvio released his wrist with a shove. Patrick stumbled back half a step, adjusting his cufflink to regain his composure. "You're emotional, Rinaldi," Patrick sneered, rubbing his wrist. "It makes you sloppy. You're letting a skirt dictate your strategy." "My strategy involves keeping my pests under control," Silvio said. "Go away, Patrick, before I forget that this is a charity event." Patrick looked at me one last time. The charm was gone. His eyes were dead, flat shark's eyes. "Nice meeting you, Chloe," he said softy. "I'm sure we'll be speaking soon." Then he did it. He raised his hand to his ear, extending his thumb and pinky finger in the universal gesture for a phone call. He mouthing the words, "Call me." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd of black tuxedos. My blood ran cold. The adrenaline that had sustained me during the confrontation drained away, leaving me feeling hollow and sick. "He has him," I whispered. Silvio turned to me, placing both hands on my shoulders, turning me away from the staring crowd to face his chest. "What?" "The gesture," I said, my voice trembling. "The phone. He has Brandon. He knows I have the encrypted phone. He expects me to negotiate." Silvio's face was a mask of granite. "We knew he might have him. This confirms it. But he didn't say it aloud. He is playing games." "He's going to kill him," I said. "If I don't." "If you don't what?" Silvio cut me off, his grip firm. "If you don't trade yourself? If you don't open the door?" He leaned down, forcing me to look at him. "Listen to me. Brandon is the bait. You are the prize. If you take the bait, the trap snaps shut on both of you. And on Lily." The mention of Lily snapped me back to reality. "Lily. If I played Patrick's game, I endangered my daughter." "I know," I said, swallowing the nausea. "I know. We are leaving," Silvio decided. "We made the appearance. We showed the flag. Now we go." "We can't just run," I argued weakly. "It looks like fear. It looks like boredom," Silvio corrected. "We walk out slow. We look like we have better things to do. Come." He tucked my hand into the crook of his arm again. We walked toward the exit. I forced myself to smile at the people we passed, to nod at the senator, to look like the queen of the underworld. But inside, my mind was racing. Call me. Patrick O'Sullivan wasn't done. The shooting at the park was the opening salvo. The confrontation here was the challenge. The end game was coming. As we stepped out into the cool night air, waiting for the valet to bring the car, I felt the phantom vibration of the phone in my pocket. It wasn't ringing. Not yet, but I knew it would. Silvio helped me into the car. As the door closed, sealing us in the safety of the armored glass, he didn't pull away. He sat close, his thigh pressed against mine. "You did well," he said quietly. "You stood your ground." I felt like I was going to vomit, I admitted, leaning my head back against the seat. "He saw a weakness," I murmured. "No," Silvio said, reaching out to touch my cheek, his thumb grazing my lower lip. "He saw a fortress. He just doesn't know how to breach it yet." The car pulled away from the curb. I looked out the window, watching the city lights streak by. Somewhere in this concrete jungle, my brother was bleeding, and the man who held the knife had just given me his number. I touched the pocket of my green dress. The phone was there. A direct line to hell. And God help me. I knew I was going to answer it. The silence in the penthouse was heavier than the emerald necklace I had just locked away in the safe. It was 3 a.m. The city outside the bulletproof glass was a sprawling grid of amber and neon, breathing its own toxic rhythm, but inside, the air was still and pressurized. I picked it up. The screen was dark, save for a single incoming number. It was blocked, of course. My hands were steady. I noted that with a detached sort of clinical interest. A month ago, a call like this would have had me shaking, hyperventilating on the bathroom floor. But living with Silvio Rinaldi changed your baseline for terror. I had watched a man gunned down at a playground. I had stared down a mob boss in a ballroom. A phone call was just noise. I swiped the screen. "Speak." "Chloe?" "Brandon," I said. My voice was ice. "You're alive." "Barely," he choked out. There was a sound of a heavy impact in the background, flesh hitting something hard, and he whimpered, "God, Chloe, they're going to kill me. You have to help me. Please." "Patrick O'Sullivan gave me this number," I said, ignoring his plea. "He wants me to trade myself for you. Is that the pitch, Brandon? You want me to come down there so they can swap one Evans for another?" I stood up, pacing the room. The floor was cold under my bare feet. "If you have a drive, give it to them. Save yourself. Silvio will not negotiate for you," I said flatly. "You stole from him too, by proxy." You brought war to his doorstep. Then don't tell him it's for me, Brandon begged. Tell him it's for the drive. Tell him it's to end the war. Chloe, please. They're going to cut off my fingers next. I'm your brother. Mom wouldn't want me to die like this. Where? I asked. The old shipyard. Pier 42. Warehouse C. Come alone first. If they see Rinaldi's army, they'll execute me before you get to the door. Just come check the drive. Once you verify it, call him. Please, Chloe. The line went dead. I lowered the phone, staring at the black screen. I wasn't stupid. I knew, with a mathematical certainty, that this was a trap. There was no drive, or if there was, it was useless. Patrick O'Sullivan wanted me in a room where Silvio couldn't protect me. He wanted the leverage that had walked out of the Plaza Hotel tonight. I looked at the door to the hallway. Down that corridor, Silvio was sleeping. Or maybe he was awake, staring at the ceiling, plotting how to keep me and Lily alive. If I woke him up, he would lock me in the panic room. He would send a team to the warehouse. If it was a trap, his men would walk into an ambush. Men like Marco or Franco, men who had pushed my daughter on a swing, would die for a brother I didn't even like. And if I didn't go, Brandon would die. Maybe he deserved it, but Patrick wouldn't stop there. He would keep coming. He would escalate. The next bullet wouldn't hit a swing set. It would hit Lily. I needed to end this. I needed to draw the infection out of the dark so it could be burned away. Patrick wanted me as bait? Fine. I would be the bait. But I would be the kind of bait that choked the shark. I moved quickly. I stripped off the silk slip and pulled on clothes that were made for running, for fighting. Black cargo pants, a thick dark sweater, heavy boots. I pulled my hair back into a tight braid. I went to the closet in the hallway, moving silently past Lily's room. I opened the door just a crack to check on her. She was sound asleep, Mr. Bear tucked under her chin. The sight of her fortified me like a shot of whiskey. I was doing this so she would never have to wake up to the sound of gunfire again. I went to Silvio's study. The door was locked, but I had the code. He had given it to me the night he taught me how to shoot. 10/24, my birthday. I hadn't commented on it at the time, but now, punching the numbers into the keypad, it felt like a heavy, sad promise. Inside the study, I went straight to the desk. I didn't take the gun. A gun in my hands against O'Sullivan's crew was a joke. I needed something else. I opened the bottom drawer where Silvio kept the tech. There, sitting in a foam cradle, was a cluster of small black discs, GPS trackers, the kind they put on shipments of heroin or cash. Active signal, real-time tracking. Then I sat at Silvio's desk and wrote a note. I didn't use the fancy Rinaldi stationery. I used a yellow sticky note. Brandon called. Pier 42, Warehouse C. I know it's a trap. I'm bringing the signal to them. Don't come for me. Come for them. I stuck the note on the center of his desk, right on top of his laptop. Now came the hard part. Getting out. The penthouse was on lockdown. The elevators required a retinal scan or Silvio's personal keycard. But I had watched Marco. I had watched him override the service elevator for deliveries. There was a maintenance panel behind the decorative plant in the vestibule. I slipped out of the study. The apartment was a tomb. I walked to the vestibule. Marco wasn't there. The night shift guard, a man named Enzo, was sitting in the chair, reading a magazine. He was facing the main elevator. I moved toward the kitchen, grabbed a glass, and deliberately dropped it. It shattered on the tile with a sound like a gunshot. Enzo jumped up, hand on his weapon, and ran toward the kitchen. Ms. Evans? Everything okay? I was already behind him, moving through the shadows of the hallway he had just vacated. I reached the service elevator vestibule. It was unguarded because who breaks out of a fortress? I pried the panel open with my fingernail. It was magnetic. I punched in the code I had memorized. 7734. The service elevator doors slid open with a soft hiss. I stepped inside and hit the button for the garage. As the doors closed, I leaned my head against the cold steel wall. I was terrified. My heart was beating so fast I felt sick, but I forced the bile down. I wasn't Chloe the victim anymore. I was the woman who had looked Silvio Rinaldi in the eye and demanded a weapon. I was bringing the war to its end. The taxi driver dropped me off 2 blocks from the pier. He didn't want to go closer. "Bad neighborhood, lady," he muttered, eyeing my cash suspiciously. "You got a death wish?" "Something like that," I said, stepping out into the damp, salty air. Pier 42 was a desolate stretch of cracked concrete. Warehouse C was a massive corrugated iron structure, its sliding doors slightly ajar, spilling a sliver of sickly yellow light onto the wet ground. I didn't sneak in. I walked right up to the gap. "I'm here!" I shouted, my voice echoing in the vast emptiness. "I'm alone." "Clean," he grunted into a radio. "Bringing her in." He grabbed my arm and dragged me inside. The warehouse was cavernous, smelling of oil and old violence. In the center, under a single hanging halogen bulb, was a wooden chair. Brandon was tied to it. He looked terrible. His face was a map of bruises, one eye swollen shut, his lip split. His shirt was torn, revealing more dark mottling on his ribs. "Chloe," he wheezed when he saw me. Fresh tears cut tracks through the blood on his cheeks. "You came. Oh God, you came." I pulled my arm free from the guard and walked toward him. I stopped 5 feet away. I didn't run to hug him. I stood there, assessing. "Where is the drive, Brandon?" I asked. He blinked, his good eye darting to the shadows beyond the light. The drive? "The evidence," I said. "The reason I'm here." He stammered. "It's Patrick has it. He took it." "There is no drive, is there?" I said softly. Brandon looked down at his lap. "I had to tell you something to make you come. They said if I got you here, they'd let me go. They'd wipe the debt." "How much?" I asked. "How much was my life worth to you? 50,000? 100? "It wasn't about the money," he sobbed. "They were going to kill me, Chloe. You have Rinaldi. You have protection. You can handle them. I'm just a guy. I'm nobody." "You're my brother," I whispered. That used to mean something. Touching reunion. The slow clap echoed from the darkness. Patrick O'Sullivan stepped into the circle of light. He was still wearing his white tuxedo shirt from the gala, though the tie was gone. He looked pristine, untouched by the grime of the warehouse. "I must say," Patrick drawled, walking around Brandon's chair like he was inspecting a piece of furniture, "I didn't think you'd actually come. I thought you were smarter than that. Or maybe just colder." "I'm here," I said, facing him. "Let him go." Patrick laughed. It was a genuine, amused sound. "Let him go." "Why?" "He's been such an entertaining guest, and besides, he hasn't finished his job yet." He pulled a knife from his belt. It wasn't a combat knife. It was a small, elegant fruit knife, probably stolen from the plaza. He rested the blade against Brandon's cheek. Brandon whimpered, straining against the ropes. The deal was simple. Patrick said to me, "You for him, but now that you're here, I realized I don't really need to choose. I can have both. Silvio knows I'm here," I lied. "He's 5 minutes out. If you don't release us, this warehouse becomes your coffin." "Silvio thinks you're tucked up in his $1 million bed," Patrick corrected, smiling. "We have a jammer on the block, no signals in or out, and my men are watching the tower. No convoy has left." I felt the tracker pressing against my skin. GPS frequencies were harder to jam than cellular, especially military-grade ones. And if Silvio had found the note, "Why are you doing this?" I asked, stalling. "You have the territory. You have the numbers. Why pick a fight with Rinaldi over a petty thief?" He walked over to me. The guard grabbed my arms again, pinning them behind my back. Patrick stopped inches from my face. He smelled of expensive cologne and rot. "You're not so tough without the diamonds, are you?" he whispered. "I don't need diamonds to be tough," I said. "I just need to know who I am. And who are you?" Patrick mocked. "The maid, the whore. I'm the distraction," I said. Patrick frowned. "What?" I didn't wait. I slammed my forehead into his nose. It was a move Marco had mentioned once, jokingly. The headbutt is the great equalizer. I heard the cartilage crunch. Patrick howled, stumbling back, clutching his face. Blood, bright red, spurted over his white shirt. "You bitch!" he screamed. The guard behind me twisted my arm, forcing me to my knees. Pain shot through my shoulder, blinding and hot. "Hold her!" Patrick roared, his voice thick with blood. "Hold her down!" He advanced on me, the knife raised. His eyes were watering, murderous. I was going to be quick. Now I'm going to take my time. "Patrick, wait!" Brandon yelled from the chair. "You promised. You said if I got her here..." "Shut up." Patrick spun around and slashed the knife across Brandon's leg. Not a lethal cut, but deep. Brandon screamed, a high, thin sound. "You are nothing," Patrick shouted at him. "You are worm food. You sold your own sister to save your skin. Do you think I respect that? Do you think I keep rats as pets?" He turned back to me. He wiped the blood from his nose onto his sleeve, leaving a gruesome smear. "Now," he panted. "Let's see if Rinaldi likes damaged goods." And I felt calm, because I felt the vibration. Not a phone, a rumble. A low, thrumming vibration in the floorboards of the pier. It was subtle at first, then growing. The sound of heavy engines. Many of them. Patrick felt it too. He paused, the knife hovering. "What is that?" "I told you," I said, lifting my chin, looking him in the eye. "He doesn't pay. He venges." The massive corrugated metal doors of the warehouse didn't slide open this time. They exploded. A black armored SUV rammed through the metal sheet like it was tin foil, the crash deafening, metal screaming as it tore. The vehicle skidded to a halt in the center of the warehouse, debris raining down. Before the dust settled, the doors of the SUV flew open. Gunfire erupted. It wasn't the chaotic spray of gang violence. It was precise. Pop, 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 pop. The guard holding me jerked violently and fell backward, a hole in his forehead. I scrambled away, crawling on my elbows to get behind a stack of pallets. Patrick dove behind Brandon's chair, using my screaming brother as a human shield. "Kill them!" Patrick screamed at his men in the shadows. "Kill everyone!" More vehicles were roaring in now, surrounding the perimeter outside. The sound of shouting, of glass breaking, filled the air. Through the haze of dust and smoke, I saw him. Silvio walked out of the dust cloud of the crashed SUV. He wasn't wearing a suit. He was wearing tactical gear, black vest, black cargo pants. He held a rifle with the ease of a man carrying a briefcase. He didn't look for cover. He walked forward, firing with terrifying, rhythmic precision. A man on the catwalk fell. A man by the door dropped. "Chloe!" His voice cut through the chaos, a roar of command. "I'm here!" I screamed, waving from behind the pallets. He saw me. For a split second, his eyes locked onto mine, and the sheer relief in them almost brought me to my knees. But then he saw Patrick cowering behind Brandon. Patrick had the knife to Brandon's throat now. "Stop!" Patrick screamed. "Stop or I slit the pig's throat!" Silvio raised a hand. His men, Marco, Franco, and 6 others who had poured in, stopped firing instantly. The silence that followed was ringing. "You lost, Patrick," Silvio said. His voice wasn't loud. It was conversational. It was the voice of a man discussing a dinner reservation. "Put the knife down." "I walk out of here," Patrick yelled, his voice trembling. "I walk out, or the brother dies." Silvio took a step forward. He lowered his rifle slightly. "Look at him, Patrick," Silvio said, gesturing to Brandon. Brandon was sobbing, shaking so hard the chair rattled against the floor. Blood soaked his pant leg. "That is the man who betrayed me," Silvio said. "That is the man who stole from you. That is the man who sold his own blood to save a debt." Silvio took another step. "Do you really think," Silvio asked, his voice dropping to a terrifying chill, "that I care if he dies?" The air left the room. I stared at Silvio. He didn't look at Brandon. He looked only at Patrick. "He is a liability," Silvio continued. "He is a cockroach. Kill him. You saved me the trouble of doing it myself." Patrick blinked. He hadn't expected this. He expected the hero speech. He expected the negotiation. You're bluffing," Patrick stammered. "He's her brother, and she is my queen." Silvio said. She came here to protect me. She put a tracker on her heart so I could find you. She is worth 1,000 of him. He raised the rifle again, aiming right at Patrick's face, which was partially obscured by Brandon's head. So go ahead, Silvio challenged. Cut his throat, and the moment his blood touches the floor, I will put a bullet in your eye. And then I will burn this pier to the waterline with your family inside it. Patrick's hand wavered. He looked at Brandon, who was staring at Silvio with horror. Chloe, Brandon whimpered. Chloe, tell him. I looked at Patrick, and then I looked at Silvio, the man who had come for me. Silvio, I said clearly. He didn't look at me. He kept his sights on Patrick. Yes? I took a deep breath. Don't miss. Patrick's eyes widened in shock. That split second of hesitation, that moment where he realized he had absolutely no leverage left, was all Silvio needed. The rifle cracked once. It was a thunderclap in the enclosed space. Patrick O'Sullivan's head snapped back. A spray of red painted the darkness behind him. He crumpled instantly, sliding down the back of the chair, the knife clattering harmlessly to the concrete. Brandon screamed, squeezing his eyes shut as Patrick's body hit the floor. Silvio lowered the weapon. He didn't check the body. He knew. He turned to me. He dropped the rifle, letting it hang by its strap, and crossed the distance between us in 3 long strides. He grabbed me, his hands crushing me against his chest, burying his face in my neck. He was shaking. The unshakable dawn of New York was trembling. You idiot, he whispered into my hair, his voice raw. You brave, stupid idiot. I wrapped my arms around him, burying my face in the tactical vest. I smelled the gunpowder and the sweat and the sandalwood. I told you to come for them. I came for you, he growled, pulling back to look at my face. He checked my eyes, my arms. Did he hurt you? Just a bruise, I said. And my shoulder is sore. I'll kill him again, Silvio muttered. Boss. Marco's voice interrupted us. The perimeter is secure. The rest of them scattered when the wall came down. Silvio nodded, not letting go of me. He turned to look at the center of the room. Brandon was still tied to the chair, sobbing quietly. He looked at us, at Silvio holding me, at the dead body of Patrick O'Sullivan behind him. Chloe, Brandon whispered. Thank you. Oh God, thank you. Can you untie me? Silvio looked at him. The warmth vanished from his face, replaced by the granite mask. Untie him, Silvio ordered Marco. Marco took out a knife and sliced the ropes. Brandon slumped forward, falling out of the chair onto his hands and knees. He crawled a few inches, coughing. Thank you, Brandon wept. I promise I'll pay you back. I'll leave town. You won't see me again. He looked up at me, a hopeful, pathetic smile on his bloodied face. We're okay, right, Chloe? Family first? I stepped out of Silvio's arms. I walked over to where Brandon was kneeling. Family first, I repeated softly. I reached into my pocket, not for a tissue, but for the tracker I had pulled off my skin. I dropped it on the ground in front of him. You called me here to die, Brandon, I said. My voice didn't tremble. You traded my life for yours. That isn't family. That's a parasite. I was scared, he pleaded. Chloe, please. I turned my back on him. I looked at Silvio. He's not my brother anymore, I said. He's just a stranger who owes you money. Silvio nodded slowly. He understood exactly what I was saying. I wasn't asking for his death. I was washing my hands of his life. Marco, Silvio said. Give him a bus ticket. One way. Anywhere west of the Mississippi. If he is found in New York after sunrise, bury him. No, Chloe, Brandon screamed as Marco hauled him up by his collar. You can't do this. I'm your blood. My blood is in the car, I said, thinking of Lily. You're just a mistake I finally corrected. I walked toward the crashed SUV without looking back. Silvio walked beside me, his arm heavy and protective around my shoulders. Behind us, Brandon's pleas faded as he was dragged out into the night. We stepped out into the cool air. The sirens were distant, but getting closer. The police, on Rinaldi payroll or not, would be here soon. Let's go home, Silvio said, opening the car door for me. Silvio got in beside me. As the convoy pulled away from the ruins of the warehouse, leaving the wreckage of the O'Sullivan Empire behind, he took my hand. He didn't say anything. He just held it, tracing the knuckles with his thumb. And in the silence, I knew the war wasn't over. There would be others. But the biggest battle, the one for my freedom from the ghosts of my past, was won. I leaned my head on his shoulder and closed my eyes. "It's over," I whispered. "No," Silvio answered softly, kissing the top of my head. "It's just beginning." The adrenaline that had fueled my escape from the penthouse, the confrontation in the warehouse, and the final stand against Patrick O'Sullivan didn't just fade. It crashed. It was a physical collapse, sudden and absolute, as if someone had cut the strings holding me upright. I was sitting in the back of the armored SUV, the leather cool against my cheek. Silvio was barking orders into his phone, his voice a low, terrifying rumble of command. He was organizing the cleanup, the cover-up, and the takeover all at once. The O'Sullivan Empire had been decapitated, and now he was ensuring the body didn't thrash around and hurt anyone else. "Silvio," I whispered. My voice sounded like it was coming from underwater. "Chloe." His hands were on me instantly, cupping my face, checking my eyes. "What is it? Are you hurt? Did a bullet graze you?" "Sugar," I managed to say, my teeth chattering. "Dropping. Fast." Silvio didn't panic. He moved with the precise, efficient urgency of a man who solved problems for a living. He reached into the compartment behind the driver's seat. He knew exactly where the emergency kit was because he had put it there himself. "Swallow," he ordered, his voice tight. "Stay with me, Chloe. Look at me." I focused on his eyes. They were dark, dilated, still holding the residual violence of the warehouse. But beneath that, there was a desperate, raw fear. He had just killed a man to save me, and now he was terrified that my own biology would finish what the mobster couldn't. "Marco," Silvio shouted toward the front. "ETA? 4 minutes to the tower, boss," Marco replied, the SUV swerving slightly as he wove through the late-night traffic. "Make it 2, Silvio snarled. "Call Rossi. Tell him to meet us in the garage, not the penthouse. The garage. I want her treated before we even get in the elevator." "Yes, boss." "You aren't allowed to die," Silvio murmured, leaning his forehead against mine. "I didn't burn down half the waterfront just to lose you to a number on a blood monitor." "I'm not dying," I breathed, feeling the first tiny spark of energy return as the glucose hit my bloodstream. "Just empty. We will fill you," he promised. "We will fix this." The car screeched around a corner, throwing me against him. His arm clamped around me like an iron band. I could smell the gunpowder on his clothes. A sharp, metallic tang mixed with the sweat of combat. It shouldn't have been comforting. It should have been terrifying. But God help me. It smelled like safety. When the SUV roared into the underground loading dock of Rinaldi Tower, it didn't slow down until the last possible second. The tires squealed on the concrete. Before the vehicle had even fully stopped, the back door was ripped open. Dr. Rossi was there, looking like he had been pulled out of bed, wearing a coat over his pajamas, holding a medical bag. "Status?" the doctor asked, stepping forward as Silvio basically carried me out of the car. "Hypoglycemic crash following extreme trauma," Silvio reported, his voice clipping the words. "She took 20 grams of rapid glucose in the car. She is conscious but disoriented." Dr. Rossi shined a penlight in my eyes. I flinched. "Pupils responsive," Rossi muttered. He slapped a sensor onto my finger. "Blood sugar is 55. Rising but slowly. We need to get her upstairs and on a steady drip. She needs complex carbs, not just sugar, or she'll crash again in an hour." "Let's go," Silvio said. He didn't put me down. He walked to the elevator, ignoring the team of cleaners who were already swarming the SUV to remove the evidence of the night's work. The ride up to the penthouse was silent. I rested my head on Silvio's shoulder, watching the numbers climb. 10, 20, 30. "You found the note," I whispered. Silvio's jaw tightened. "I found the note. I had to go," I said. "He would have killed Brandon. He killed Brandon anyway," Silvio said harshly. "The moment you walked in that door, your brother was dead." The man who walked out of there tonight is a ghost. He doesn't exist to us anymore. I knew he was right. The brother I had tried to save had died in that chair when he asked me to untie him before asking if I was okay. I know, I said. The elevator doors opened directly into the penthouse. The lights were low. Check the perimeter, Silvio ordered Marco, who had shadowed us up. I want the lockdown maintained until sunrise. No one in, no one out. He carried me to the master bedroom. Not my room. His room. He laid me down on the massive bed with a gentleness that belied the violence he was capable of. Dr. Rossi bustled in, setting up an IV pole next to the nightstand. Small prick. The doctor apologized, sliding a needle into the vein of my arm. I barely felt it. I was watching Silvio. He was pacing at the foot of the bed, his hands running through his hair. He looked like a caged tiger. The energy of the fight had nowhere to go. Mr. Rinaldi, Dr. Rossi said cautiously. She needs rest and food. A sandwich, something substantial. I'll make it, Silvio said instantly. Sir, the staff. I said I will do it, Silvio snapped. He looked at me, his eyes softening for a fraction of a second. I know what she eats. He turned and stalked out of the room toward the kitchen. Dr. Rossi taped the IV line to my arm, shaking his head slightly. I have treated Silvio Rinaldi for 10 years, the doctor murmured. Stab wounds, gunshot grazes, broken ribs. I have never seen him scared until tonight. He hides it well, I said, my voice gaining strength as the saline and dextrose did their work. No, Rossi corrected, packing his bag. He doesn't hide it. He usually doesn't feel it. You have changed the baseline, Ms. Evans. Silvio returned 10 minutes later with a tray. A turkey sandwich on whole wheat, an apple, and a glass of milk. It was the exact meal plan we had discussed for my late-night lows. He set the tray down and sat on the edge of the bed. Dr. Rossi excused himself, knowing better than to linger. Eat, Silvio ordered. I sat up, picking up the sandwich. My hands were steady now. I took a bite. It tasted like sawdust, but I forced myself to chew. Where is Lily? I asked after swallowing. Asleep, Silvio said. Mrs. Rossi is with her. She didn't wake up when I left. She didn't know you were gone. Good. I exhaled. That's good. Silvio watched me eat for a moment. Then he reached out and touched the bruise forming on my shoulder where the guard had twisted my arm. His touch was feather-light. I should have killed them slower, he said, his voice devoid of emotion. For touching you. They're dead, Silvio. It's done. It's not done, he said. He stood up again, the restless energy propelling him. Patrick is dead, but the O'Sullivan organization is a hydra. With the head cut off, the body will thrash. His lieutenants will panic. They will either try to strike back immediately to prove strength, or they will scatter and loot the empire. He walked to the window, looking out at the city. I cannot allow chaos, he said. Chaos is bad for business. It brings the feds. It brings heat. I put the sandwich down. I knew what he was saying. I knew what the black tactical vest he was still wearing meant. You have to go back out, I said. Go finish it. He hesitated. I just got you back. Leaving you. I'm in the fortress, I reminded him. I have the IV. I have the gun in the pantry. And I have Marco outside the door. I swung my legs off the bed, ignoring the IV pole, and stood up. I walked over to him. I looked small next to him, barefoot and wearing dusty cargo pants. While he stood in full tactical gear, I reached up and placed my hand on the ceramic plate of his vest, right over his heart. You started a war for me, I said. Now go win it, because I don't want to look over my shoulder anymore. I want to raise my daughter, and I want to do it here. Silvio covered my hand with his. You are staying? I told you in the warehouse, I said. I'm done running. This is my home. You are my home. I will be back at dawn, he promised against my lips. Lock the door, verify the code. Trust no one but Marco. Come back to me, I whispered. Always. He turned and walked out of the room. I heard the heavy front door open and close. I heard the lock engage. I was alone again. But this time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like a pause. A breath before the new world began. I finished the sandwich. I unhooked the IV bag once it was empty, knowing how to do it from years of managing my own care. I went into the bathroom and stripped off the dirty clothes. I showered, scrubbing the warehouse grime and the warehouse smell off my skin. I watched the water swirl gray down the drain. I put on a clean robe, one of the thick white terry cloth ones with the Rinaldi crest embroidered on the pocket. I went to check on Lily. She was sleeping in the star-shaped position she always adopted, taking up the entire bed. Mrs. Rossi was dozing in the rocking chair. I touched Mrs. Rossi's shoulder gently. "Go to bed, Maria," I whispered. "I've got her." The old woman blinked awake, nodded, and shuffled out to her quarters. I sat in the rocking chair, watching my daughter sleep. I thought about Brandon. I tried to find tears for him. I tried to summon the grief I knew a sister should feel. But all I found was a dull ache, like a scar from an old surgery. He had made his choice. He had chosen money over blood. I looked at Lily. I had chosen blood over everything. The hours passed slowly. I didn't sleep. I moved through the penthouse like a ghost, touching the furniture, looking at the art. I was claiming the space. It wasn't just a cage anymore. It was a castle, and the dragon had given me the keys. Around 5 odd a.m., the sky began to lighten, turning from bruised purple to a pale, cold gray. I was standing by the window in the living room when the elevator chimed. I didn't flinch. I waited. The doors opened. Silvio stepped out. He stopped when he saw me standing there. "It is done," he said. His voice was raspy, worn down to the gravel. "The O'Sullivans?" I asked. "Dissolved," he said. "The captains surrendered. The territory is ours. The Irish are no longer a problem in New York." He walked toward me, moving slowly, like his bones were heavy. "And Brandon?" I asked. I had to know. "He is on a Greyhound bus to Omaha," Silvio said. "Marco watched it leave the terminal. He has $500 and a terrifying memory of tonight. He won't come back." I nodded. It was better than he deserved. Silvio stopped in front of me. He didn't touch me. He looked at his hands, then at my clean white robe. "I'm dirty," he said. "I smell like smoke." "I don't care," I said. I reached out and took his hands. They were cold. I brought them to my lips, kissing the raw knuckles. "You burned the world down," I whispered. "I told you I would," he said, looking at me with an intensity that made my knees weak. "I would burn it all down for you. Do you believe me now?" "I believe you." I led him toward the bedroom. He didn't argue. He let me lead him. For the first time, he wasn't the one in charge. He was the one coming home to rest. We didn't have sex. We were both too battered, too drained. We stripped down to our skin and climbed into the massive bed. Silvio pulled me against him, his arm heavy over my waist, his face buried in the crook of my neck. "Chloe," he mumbled as sleep began to drag him under. "I'm here," I said, stroking his hair. "My mom," he whispered, his voice slurring slightly. "She didn't wake up either. When I was a kid. Hypoglycemia." That's why I knew. He hadn't just seen a sick woman. He had seen a chance to rewrite his own trauma. "You woke me up," I whispered into the darkness, holding him tighter. "You saved me, Silvio." He didn't answer. He was already asleep. We were monsters. We were survivors. We were a family forged in blood and sugar, because he had burned the world for me, and I would build a new one for him from the ashes. The transition had been seamless, at least on the surface. The disappearance of the O'Sullivan leadership was written off by the papers as an internal gang war. The sudden expansion of Rinaldi logistics was praised by the financial sector. Inside the penthouse, the changes were smaller, but more significant. I wasn't wearing a uniform. I was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and jeans, sitting at the desk in the study, our study now. "The catering contract for the hotel chain needs approval," I said, spinning the laptop around. Silvio looked up from his paperwork. He was wearing reading glasses, something he only did around me, and looking annoyingly handsome. "Handle it," he said. "You know the budget." "I know the budget is inflated," I corrected. "I found a better vendor. We save 15%, and the quality is higher." Silvio smiled. It was a real smile, one that reached those whiskey eyes. Ruthless. I like it. Mommy, Daddy! Lily ran into the room, holding a piece of paper. She stopped, breathless. I froze. It was the first time she had called him that. Daddy. Silvio froze too. His pen stopped moving. Lily didn't notice the tension. She ran up to Silvio's chair. Look, I got a gold star on my spelling test. Silvio looked at me. I looked at him. There was a question in his eyes. A hesitation. Is this allowed? I smiled and nodded. Silvio turned to Lily. He picked her up and set her on his lap, ignoring the multi-million-dollar contracts on the desk. A gold star? He said, his voice full of wonder. That is amazing, Tesoro. We should frame it. Can we put it on the fridge? Lily asked. We can put it on the fridge, Silvio agreed. And then we can get ice cream. Yes, Lily cheered. I watched them. The killer and the child. The past was a grave in a warehouse. The future was a gold star on a refrigerator. I picked up the pen and signed the contract. Chloe Evans was gone. The woman sitting in this chair was someone else entirely, and she was exactly where she belonged. The morning sun streamed across the living area, no longer a hostile searchlight, but a gentle, golden invitation. 2 months had passed since the night of the pier. 2 months of silence, security, and a terrifying, fragile sense of peace. The penthouse had transformed. It wasn't the museum of black marble and expensive coldness it had been. It was lived in. Lily's vibrant crayon drawings were taped to the stainless steel refrigerator with novelty magnets. A half-finished crossword puzzle lay on the mahogany coffee table, left there by Chloe. The air smelled of espresso, and the comforting scent of fresh-baked cinnamon rolls, a recipe Chloe had mastered for Sunday mornings. Chloe sat at the long kitchen island, wearing a simple, cream-colored cashmere sweater and dark trousers. She was not in a uniform. She was dressed like a partner, a woman with purpose. Her hair was pulled back, not in the tired bun of a cleaner, but in a neat, professional chignon. She was leaning over a massive ledger, the kind Silvio used for his legitimate holdings, her brow furrowed in concentration. The profit margin on the 3 New Jersey hotels is unacceptable, Chloe stated, tapping a pen against a column of numbers. The laundry services are overcharging by 25%, and the inventory control for the linen supply is atrocious. I've sourced a new vendor in Queens. Smaller operation, family-owned. We save $80,000 a quarter and they deliver the next day. Silvio sat opposite her, wearing a soft gray t-shirt and dark, comfortable trousers. The clothes of a man finally relaxing on his own time. He was reading the print edition of the Wall Street Journal, but the paper was lowered, and his whiskey-colored eyes were fixed on her, a faint smile touching his lips. Is that your analysis or the projection? He asked, not challenging her competence, but gauging her confidence. It's my plan, Chloe corrected, pushing the binder toward him. I already have the contracts drafted. All they need is your signature and the Rinaldi seal. If we implement this by the end of the fiscal quarter, we can absorb the entire cost of the new security system at the tower without touching the reserves. Silvio picked up the binder. He flipped to the cost analysis page, scanned the figures, then turned to the contract. His pen hovered over the signature line for barely a second, before he scrawled his name with a decisive flourish. You handle it, Chloe, he said, pushing the binder back. You have the authority. You have the access codes. Why are you waiting for my signature? Protocol, she answered simply. I might have authority over the logistics, but you're the Don. I respect the chain of command. I respect competence, Silvio replied, the words warm with genuine admiration. In a few short weeks, you've fixed more leaks in the legitimate structure than my entire accounting team did in 2 years. You have an eye for efficiency. The conversation was interrupted by a commotion near the window. Lily was sitting on a plush rug, surrounded by a mountain of building blocks. She was talking animatedly to her dolls, explaining the difference between a load-bearing wall and a partition. Mommy, Mr. Bear says the fire escape should go here, Lily announced, pointing to a block structure that defied gravity. Mr. Bear is very smart, Chloe called back, but the architect needs to consider the flow of traffic, sweetie. Lily giggled and returned to her architecture. Silvio watched her, a soft, indulgent expression on his face that he reserved only for the child. He had changed since the night of the pier. The constant, coiled tension had eased. The color in his eyes seemed lighter, less shadowed. He hadn't just saved her. The act had saved him too, stripping away some layer of isolation he had carried for years. He picked up a piece of Lily's drawing that had fluttered onto the table. It was a picture of the penthouse skyline, drawn in thick crayons. He was on the roof, holding a stick figure that was clearly Lily, and they were looking down at a tiny, stylized dragon at the base of the building. "She still draws the dragon," Silvio observed quietly. "He's her protector," Chloe said, looking over. "In her mind, you're the dragon, the one who keeps the wolves away." "I am a violent man, Chloe," Silvio said, his voice dropping low, the self-awareness a constant shadow in their intimacy. "I do not want her to romanticize that. She romanticizes the protection, not the violence," Chloe corrected gently. She was a terrified little girl who ran to the man in the big suit because he was the only one who seemed strong enough to carry her mother. "That's her truth, Silvio. You earned her trust by showing up." Just then, Lily ran over, dropping the drawing. She scrambled up onto Silvio's lap without even asking permission, her small body settling into the groove of his arm as naturally as if she had been doing it for years. She snuggled against his chest, looking up at him. "Daddy," Lily said, her voice bright and cheerful. "Will you take me to the aquarium today? Franco said they have a shark tank that's very big." The word hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Chloe froze, her breath caught in her throat. She had heard it. Silvio had heard it. Silvio's reading glasses slipped down his nose. His eyes, fixed on the child, were suddenly wet, startled, and profoundly moved. The newspaper, which he had been holding loosely, fell from his hands onto the marble floor. Lily, oblivious to the emotional earthquake she had just caused, tilted her head. "Daddy, are we going?" Silvio didn't answer immediately. He couldn't. He closed his eyes for a brief, shuddering moment, as if collecting himself. When he opened them, the raw emotion was visible. He was looking at Chloe, seeking a confirmation, a permission that transcended words. Chloe didn't smile or nod. She simply met his gaze, her own eyes warm and steady. "Yes." She said it. "It's real. This is us." Silvio looked back down at the child on his lap. He reached up and gently smoothed the hair from her face. Lily cheered, throwing her arms around his neck. Silvio hugged her back, burying his face in her hair for a long moment, clinging to the child who had just named him as her own. Chloe watched them, a fierce surge of love and certainty washing over her. When Lily hopped off his lap and ran to her room to grab her coat and Mr. Bear, Silvio remained seated, staring at the floor where the newspaper lay. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a leather envelope. He slid it across the island to Chloe. "I had Anthony deliver this last week," he said, his voice back to its controlled baritone, but quieter. "I wanted to wait until the O'Sullivan transition was complete." Chloe opened the envelope. Inside were several legal documents. The first was a deed of trust, creating a substantial, irrevocable financial fund in the name of Lily Evans. It was structured to be inaccessible to Silvio and, more importantly, to any future claims against his estate. It secured her education, her medical care, and her future independence, no matter what happened to him. The second was a deed to a property, a beautiful, modest brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, purchased under a shell corporation completely divorced from Rinaldi's known assets. It was fully furnished, ready to occupy. The third was a sheaf of ID adoption papers, legal documents naming Silvio Rinaldi as the petitioner for the full legal adoption of Lily Evans. Chloe lifted the property deed and the trust documents. She knew what this was, the ultimate gilded cage, but one built with love, not control. "It's a lot," she said, looking up at him. "It is security," Silvio corrected. "The trust is for Lily. The apartment is for you. In case. In case of what?" "In case you ever decide you want out," he said, meeting her eyes. "In case the life I lead becomes too heavy a burden. The apartment is yours. The money in the trust is yours to use for Lily, without having to ask me for a single dollar. You leave, you disappear, you start over, with everything you need. That is the price of your freedom, Chloe. I bought you an exit. He leaned forward, his elbows on the counter. I hope you never use it. I hope you stay and handle my logistics for the next 50 years. I hope you let Lily call me Daddy for the rest of my life. But if you choose to leave, I will never send a man after you. You walk away clean. That is my promise. Chloe picked up the property deed for the Brooklyn Heights brownstone. She looked at the address, then at the section that outlined the terms of transfer. She reached for the small chrome lighter he kept by the sink for the rare occasion he lit one of his expensive cigars. She flipped the lid and sparked the flame. "What are you doing?" Silvio asked, his voice low, a mix of alarm and fascination. Chloe held the deed over a metal mixing bowl. She touched the corner of the heavy paper to the flame. The deed ignited instantly, curling at the edges, turning black and brittle. She dropped the burning paper into the bowl, watching it disintegrate into ash. "I'm done running, Silvio," she said, her voice clear and decisive. "You bought me an exit. But I don't need an exit. I need an entrance." She pushed the empty leather envelope and the adoption papers back across the island to him. "The apartment is gone," she said. "The trust is fine. That's for Lily's independence, and that stays. But I don't want a back door. If I leave, it will be because you broke your promise, not because I'm scared." She picked up his pen from the counter. She signed the final witness line on the adoption documents with a steady hand. "I need you to sign this," she said, sliding the papers to him. "Not because of the law, but because of the name she just gave you." Silvio took the pen. His hand was shaking slightly again, just like the night at the park, but this time from overwhelming emotion, not fear. He scrawled his name, Silvio Rinaldi, as the legal co-parent of Lily Evans. "You are a terrifying woman, Chloe Evans," he murmured. "You know that?" "I learned from the best," I said, my own eyes softening. "I love you too," Silvio replied, the words thick and honest. "From the moment you fell on my floor." He kissed me then. A slow, deep kiss that sealed the promise better than any legal document or diamond necklace ever could. It was a promise built on 2 months of seeing each other for who we truly were. Not maid and boss, but 2 broken people who found refuge in a common war. A small voice piped up from the hallway. "Daddy, the car is here." Silvio pulled back, resting his forehead against mine. He chuckled, a genuine, easy sound. "Duty calls," he murmured. "Go see the sharks," I told him, smoothing the lapels of his casual sweater. He took my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. We walked out of the kitchen and into the living room, where Lily was waiting patiently by the sealed front door, wearing her little pink coat. "Ready, Daddy," she announced, reaching up for his hand. Silvio squeezed my hand once before letting go to take Lily's small one. He looked at me, his gaze sweeping from the ashes in the bowl to the diamond necklace I was wearing over the cream sweater. "My armor, my prize, my choice. I'm already home, Silvio," I said, a finality in my tone that closed the chapter on fear forever. He smiled, a wide, open, devastating smile that reached all the way to his whiskey-colored eyes. Silvio and Lily walked to the private elevator. Lily chattered happily about the great white sharks, holding the hand of the man who had become her father. I watched them go. They were going out into the city Silvio Rinaldi now owned, the city where his name meant safety. I didn't worry about the O'Sullivans or the other families. They were ashes and memories. I walked back into the study and sat down at the desk. I picked up the ledger and the pen. I had work to do. I had a logistics empire to run. The phone on the desk, the encrypted one, rang once. It was Marco. "Boss told me to check in, Ms. Evans," he said. "Do you need anything before we head to the aquarium?" "No, Marco," I said, opening the next binder. "Everything is under control. Have a good Sunday." I hung up the phone. I looked at the glittering skyline. The fear was gone. The exhaustion was replaced by purpose. I was sitting at the epicenter of the most powerful criminal organization in the city, and I had never felt safer. I had traded my freedom for safety, and in doing so, I had found a love that was fierce, absolute, and undeniably mine. The Mafia boss's heart and home were mine now, and that was a more powerful empire than any man could ever build alone.